the longer the shelf life, the shorter your life.
Oh, wow.
So, and that's just like, I like that. I was just saying that to my mom too, because she was like, I've been eating these healthier things and like I'm realizing they all expire. I'm like, yeah. Well, when you eat fruits and vegetables, they don't last forever because they're like, we are living beings, so we should be eating living food.
All right, cool. I think we're live. All right.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you, Emily, for joining me on my podcast today. I'm currently like rebranding it. It's going to be called the Henosis podcast. Um,
The hypnosis podcast?
Henosis, Henosis.
Okay.
So that's ancient. It's ancient Greek for like pretty much unity, unison, just coming together. And I'm just having conversations with people that I find interesting, people that I want to learn from, people that I believe they can add value to, just the kind of collective, I like to say consciousness, which humanity pretty much. So I pretty much found you on TikTok, and I thought your content was pretty dope. You talk about neuroscience, and just I think you just talk about practical steps on how anything that has to do with neuroscience, how it can help us, and I don't know. I just find your content super interesting.
Thank
Um,
you.
but I'll stop talking for you. Let's just can you let people know who you are, what you do, and all that good stuff.
Yeah, so I guess I can kind of just start out by like explaining like how I got into this content because it is kind of all over the place. Like you were like saying it is neuroscience, but it's really just anything that I find interesting. So I graduated from UT Austin last May, majored in neuroscience. But I like during COVID, everyone dealt with like mental health stuff and all of that. And for
Mm-hmm.
me, I like had gotten out of a huge breakup, and then I was like, well, I wanted to rebrand myself pretty much. And I just found myself kind of like learning a lot about mental health and a lot about like the behavioral tools and things that you can do to improve your life that aren't drugs. It's not like going to doctors. It's not like, it's things that you can do at home every single day to just improve the quality of your life. And it's kind of almost like preventative medicine because in a way you're improving your life so that way you don't like get sick or have to go to the doctor. But basically it was just like really helping me. And I started to tell people, like post on my like Snapchat story, my Instagram story, like little tips here and there. And people were like, hey, this stuff's really cool. Like you should start like posting it more. Like, can you post more tips? This is really helpful. And I was like, yeah, sure. So I started posting more, and then it ended up just being a TikTok account. And now I'm just posting all the time. But yeah, so that's really how it started. It was really just started because I was posting things that were helping me, and I was like, hey, like you guys should do this too because it's really cool and it's really helpful and it's super easy. Just it's anything you can do it like at home every single day, and it improves the
Yeah.
quality of your life, your mental health, and then also just like cool information that I learn about the brain or about life, and I'm like, hey, like more people should know this. So that's kind
Yeah.
of where that all came about. And now I am currently getting my PhD in neuroscience here at the University of
Nice.
Arizona, minoring in medical pharmacology because, and I already finished that minor, but that's because I'm studying drug addiction. So I'm currently researching new therapeutic targets for treatments to prevent relapse to drug addiction.
Awesome. That's really cool. I find it fascinating that I find it really awesome that you're on TikTok while you're in college working on your PhD. Wait, how old are you?
I'm 23.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. That's just
Yeah.
I want to give you your flowers there and just say that's pretty awesome that you're doing that, and I think you're doing a great job by just putting the content out. I think it's super helpful information. I think there's people out there who are doing content like you're doing, but I think you bring a different spin to it. Have you heard of Andrew Huberman?
Of course.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
he does content like yours, and you have your way of doing content, which I think is awesome. But I heard you say you were getting your PhD. Did you say behavior addiction? Is that what you said?
My PhD is going to be in neuroscience.
Neuroscience. Gotcha,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Yeah.
What
And
what do
yeah.
you? Oh, go for it. Sorry.
Oh, I was going to say Andrew Huberman's actually kind of like what inspired me to start posting in the first place, because I was like, hey, like if he's out here like posting podcasts, but I was like, I want to do it in a more consumable way, like because I know most people don't have like 2 hours to spend sitting and listening to podcasts, right? Or
Yes.
they don't even want like they want to know that information, but they might not even like. There's a lot you have to work through with his podcast. I mean, I
Yeah.
love them because I'm a neuroscientist, so like I listen to them and it's really interesting and I love all of it. But like a lot of people don't care about like all the things that he says, and they just want the behavioral tool, or they just want the quick thing, like what can I do? So that's kind of what I try to like tell people.
Right, right. And that's what I love about your content. It's very like bite sized. Like you can consume it and then, it's kind of sitting there in your subconscious and then, I think you start to pick up on certain things that you talk about in your TikToks. Whereas his podcast, he's super long-winded and he's also like his reels or TikToks are very like he's so I don't know what's the right word, but he's just
He's older.
yeah, yeah, there you go.
I don't think that
I
he
didn't want to
also
say
like
it.
when I first started making the videos, like if you scroll down to the beginning of my TikTok, which I don't suggest that you do this, you'll see like I mean I've definitely gotten better at it. Like I used to like they used to be longer and me like really explaining things, but then I realized like oh like remove all the little words, like remove everything, and you kind of have to learn as you go. His content is his way, you know what I mean? But I'm like framing it for like younger people, right? So younger people have more access to this information because I think that's really important. Like eventually at some point when I have my PhD, I can try to get this stuff in schools because I think it's really important to know this, especially like as a teenager,
Hmm.
like in high school. But yeah, I think that his stuff is, you could tell he's a professor. You could tell he's a college professor. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the best way to put it, I think.
Do you have like a specific way of creating content? Like, do you write it out? Because you like whenever I watch your videos, you're very. It's like it almost seems like off the cuff almost. That's how natural it seems. But do you like write your content out, or how do you prepare, or how do you create content?
Yeah, so it definitely depends on the video because sometimes it really is just like what I'm gonna say and that's it. And then if I like want to re-say something, like I'll just re-record that little clip because I record it in like one sentence at a time, right?
Okay.
And yeah, so I'll just like re-record a little portion if I'm like, oh, I should reword that. Like that's something I'm definitely learning as I go as well. Like there's a lot of sensitive people on TikTok, and I mean, you can't make everyone happy with
Hmm.
content creation. Like you got to stay true to yourself, which is another thing I'm learning. But yeah, there's some wording things, especially because I'm talking about like medications and stuff. I'm like, hey, like I got to be really careful about what I say because I could potentially make a generalization that I don't even mean when I say it, but then other people take it the wrong way. And I'm like, well, shoot, I didn't even mean it like that. So yeah,
Hmm.
sometimes I listen back and I'm just like, I'm going to record that. But a lot of times, like if I haven't, like if I like learn something cool or I have like someone ask like a really like deep question and I'm like, okay, well, how do I make this short? I have like, it's so funny. I call it my Buddy the Elf notepad because it looks just like the the little guy on Buddy the Elf that has the Miles Finch or whatever, his little notebook with his
Okay.
sketchbook. So I have that. I have like a little sketchbook, and I'll just write down like key points, just like literally like just a couple words like per like just key points, and then it is kind of off the cuff, but it's not like scripted. You know what I mean?
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
It
can
it
kind of like.
does it does come off very, I guess polished and the best way I can put it. It comes off very polished and I think it's awesome for whoever is trying to learn about neuroscience or even um, just practical ways that they can take care of their brain, their mental health. Did you ever struggle with like any like mental health issues growing up as a teenager? Because that's what I assume why you decided to follow neuroscience.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually not why I decided to follow neuroscience. I actually started in undergrad as a biology major, and I hated it.
Mm-hmm.
And I literally was in a pre-health organization in undergrad because I didn't really know what I wanted to do, honestly. I didn't really decide what I wanted to do until I took a neurobiology of addiction class, learned about why the current treatments don't work, and then I was like, I can do better. And then I was like, how do I do better? I got to do research. How do I do that? I got to get my PhD. And then it was like 6 months later I was applying. So that's kind of how that happened. I really, and like someone in my organization was literally like, you might like neuroscience, it's cool. So me being impulsive, I just changed my major to neuroscience, and then I ended up loving it. So best decision ever. But yeah, I mean, I definitely had my, like, I definitely did deal with depression in high school. Whole bunch of things, even down to like a suicide attempt. Like, it was definitely dark for a while. So I can relate to people. Like, I know how it is. And I know a lot of people say, like, you can't just like smile your way through it or whatever, but like,
Mm-hmm.
trust me, I know how it is. Like, I know how it feels to be like hopeless or think that like there's no way out or not even care if there is, because depression isn't even like sadness. It's just you actually just don't care about
Mm-hmm.
anything. So like, I really know how it is, but that's, yeah, I mean, it's a big reason why I'm really passionate about it, because honestly, like, I'm, and this is not medical advice, but it's just like, I mean, I was even on depression medication in high school, and it just never helped me. Like, it never did anything. Like, I found an old journal literally a couple weeks ago, and I was writing down like, oh my God, like I took a couple days off my meds and I don't feel better. It means they're not working and all this stuff. And I was like, damn, like I was so sad in high school writing this stuff, thinking I was
Mm-hmm.
messed up in the brain because these medications weren't helping me, when I wish I had someone that was telling me like, here are the things that you can do that actually will change your brain for the better so that you don't have depression, because the medications are really just slapping a band-aid on the problem and they're not actually fixing the core root cause of the problem.
Yeah, that's. I feel like that's a common consensus with with anyone who takes kind of those antidepressant medication. I feel like, yeah, they just kind of get you all. It. I never taken them any. I haven't taken any myself, but I feel like a lot of the time it does like numb or even suppress kind of what you're experiencing. Is that kind of accurate? Is that accurate the way to?
I'm not sure. I don't know. I think it definitely depends as well, because there's different types of depression, and that's a whole different story. Like, psychiatrists really should be scanning people's brains before they prescribe medication. Um, if you know who Dr. Amen is, you know who that is.
I don't.
He is really big on Instagram. I don't know if he has a TikTok, but he's really big on Instagram, post reels and stuff. He's like, he was named like America's favorite psychiatrist or whatever.
Hmm.
But he's the one that did all of the um, concussion football players, concussion brain scans on the football
Mm-hmm.
players, and he found like, he just found all of that. He did a lot of that research, and I think he's done like the most brain scans out of any psychiatrist in America, at least.
Mm-hmm.
So he talks a lot about that, and he tells stories about how he'll have couples that come in that are like, the husband is dealing with all these problems and anger issues and stuff, and he scans their brains and he sees like the husband's brain looks like he's addicted to drugs, when no, it's his job. He's been working at this place where they like spray paint stuff or something, and the fumes were actually like damaging an area of his brain that was causing him
Wow.
to have like, yeah, anger management issues. And he was able to help him rehabilitate his brain, and now like the couple is still happily married, and they were literally on the verge of divorce. So it's like that serious. And I know that there's people with depression that take medication. I've heard stories where it actually makes them worse, and that
Mm-hmm.
could be a case of that. Like, you don't know what's really going on unless you look. And it's kind of like, and it's just it's a tough thing, because obviously like brain scans are not cheap, and
Right.
every psychiatrist doesn't do them. Most of them don't do them. Like, for me, going to the psychiatrist was just basically going to the drug dispensary.
Mm.
And from my comments on TikTok, I can tell that a lot of people like feel the same way. You're not They're not really like, at least for me in my experience, they weren't really trying to like help me rehabilitate my brain to get better. They were more trying to just give me meds and get me out the door. And it's like, that's kind of like a money-making operation. It's not.
Yeah.
Every doctor is different. There's probably doctors out there that are helping you, and that's great. If people have those, like, hang on to them because they're rare.
That's interesting. I do agree, like, getting a brain scan is definitely not the cheapest thing for us to do. But what are some ways that we can, for anyone out there, what are some ways that we can, like, actually take care of our brain, because there are things like you said, that gentleman who was working that job where they were spraying, the chemicals were getting into, his brain somehow. But there, he probably has to work that job because it's how he provides. There's jobs that we have to work in order to provide for our families. What are some things that we can do that can help us take care of our brain so that, at least we're controlling what we can control? What are some practical ways we can do that?
Yeah, so I would say, like, number one, like, or there's two really, like, the two most important things are diet and exercise, right? Exercise is neuroprotective, and there was also research that I was just getting really into that was describing how daily exercise increases the birth of new brain cells in the hippocampus, which improves memory and also prevents the cognitive decline that happens with aging. So exercise just has so many benefits. You also get, like, the endocrine system going with, like, the hormones that are endorphins, like, make you happy, and which that will improve mental health. And it also increases dopamine, so you'll get that. And, like, especially, like, I was just talking about it for my people that deal with, like, focus and concentration issues, like, exercising in the morning, so helpful. It increases dopamine in the morning, and dopamine is the neurotransmitter that helps you stay motivated and focused. It's not just for reward, which I think is another thing a lot of people don't realize, is that dopamine isn't just, like, something you get when you achieve something. It's actually released in the pursuit of your goals. It's released to help you stay motivated. It's the reason why a lot of times you can kind of feel a crash after you do achieve the goal, because you're like, well, what do I do now? It's because dopamine was being released on the way there, not, like, after, not as much after, at least. Yeah. And then for diet, like, seriously, it's so important. Like, I have been getting more and more into just the food industry, and basically, I mean, it's a good rule of thumb. This is something that Dr. Amen says, like, the longer the shelf life, the shorter your life.
Oh, wow.
So, and that's just, like, I like that. I was just saying that to my mom too, because she was like, I've been eating these healthier things, and, like, I'm realizing they all expire. I'm like, yeah. Well, when you eat fruits and vegetables, they don't last forever because they're like, we are living beings, so we should be eating living foods. Like fruits, vegetables, like, the more you can cut out processed food, the better, especially, like, refined sugars and stuff, because that's also, like, things like that are, and gluten is a neuroinflammatory. It inflames your brain. It inflames your gut. It's really not good for you. I actually am allergic to gluten, so I haven't been eating it in, like, at least, like, 5-6 years. And people always say, like, I'm so sorry, but I'm like, no, it's a blessing, because I wasn't able to eat it. And when I realized I was allergic to it and stopped eating it, I started doing, like, way better in school. I started, like, seriously just feeling way better as well. I think that's a big reason people could be dealing with anxiety and depression as well. Because gluten is wheat, and so, and a lot of the packaged carbs, like bread and all of that, is very processed. So, like, not only the gluten, but the fact that gluten is also in a lot of processed foods as well. And that's a generalization. There's things that aren't. So,
Awesome.
Yeah.
So it was more of, I'm sorry, what were we going to say?
No, I was just going to say, yeah, so those are just some important things to keep in mind with diet and exercise. And there's also, obviously, like, supplementation, like herbs. I'm really into herbs. And also, like, just chugging water. Like, chugging water is really important. And blueberries, if you actually want to, like, really feed your brain, blueberries are really good for your brain.
Yeah, that's a lot of the like a lot of what you're saying are some of the things that I, commonly come across whenever I'm looking up how to, take care of my brain. Like, what's your take on? Because I exercise and I try to eat super clean, not super clean, but no processed food, just
Hmm.
whole foods. So I try to do as much as that as I can, and how much I can afford as well. Um, What's your take on like supplements like omega 3s? Like, are those okay or?
Yeah, I actually take omega 3s right now because I mostly follow a plant-based diet, and that's not like, I know not the best for everyone, but for me personally, that's like what works for me. Um, so yeah, I actually take omega 3s. They're really good for your brain because your brain, I can't remember the exact percentage, but it's an extremely high percentage of fat. And so you need healthy fats like avocados, and omega 3s are really good for your brain.
Okay, cool. And then you also mentioned exercise, and I think I saw one of your TikToks talking about this as well. You were saying a lot of zone 2. Um, what exactly is zone 2 exercise, or
Yeah.
could you go a little bit
That's
more into
hilarious.
that?
That's hilarious because I truly didn't know. People didn't know what that was. I guess like because I had like a little short bout of Orange Theory where was going to Orange Theory for a while, and
uh,
they literally put it up on a TV screen like what zone you're in. So like that's why I knew what it was because I when I was reading it like it just made sense. But I guess like obviously most people don't know. I learned that. Um, yeah, so it's actually just around 60 to, I don't even want to say 70 because that's getting toward intense, but it's like 60 to 70% of your max heart rate. And a lot of people don't know how to figure that out. There's like a scale you can do where you go 220 minus your age. So if I'm
mm-hmm.
23, 220 minus my age, like 197 should be my max heart rate. And
Uh-huh.
then you would just take 60% of that. And then that's like my zone 2 heart rate, or if I'm chilling at. But that wouldn't even make any sense unless you had a heart rate monitor.
Mm-hmm.
So um the best way to describe it is just aerobic exercise. So like cardio exercise, even if it's not cardio, because they did the studies, the research was on cardio. So that's what I can like say for sure. But if what really matters is like your heart rate and like the amount that you're like exerting, it's just an exercise that's not extremely intense to where you're like out of breath and you can't. The way I had it described to me is an exercise that you could hold a conversation but not comfortably. So you could be talking to
Gotcha.
someone, but like you're like, so you're not completely out of breath. You could still like have a conversation, but it wouldn't be easy. Like you'd be like huffing and puffing trying to talk to someone. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Does that kind
Okay.
of make sense? Is that like a good
Yeah,
enough?
it does. Cause for me, I don't like power lift, but I do your typical like push pull legs workout. But
Mm-hmm.
I feel like those you have like a significant rest period in between like sets and even exercises. So I don't know if that would signify as zone 2. But it sounds
Yeah.
more like cardio stuff, like more stuff that you're
Yeah.
constantly doing.
Hmm. Cardio, and then honestly, I would go as far to say leg day is probably zone 2, like because
Okay.
leg day you're pretty out of breath, right? Like
Yeah.
you're working pretty hard on leg day. Like I would say leg day, but like when I hit upper body, like I don't think I'm getting into zone 2. That's just me
Gotcha.
personally. Like obviously everyone's different, which is why like the heart rate thing is the most consistent way of describing it. But
Hmm.
yeah, it's just like medium intensity exercise. Zone 3 is, there's only 3 zones, I'm pretty sure. So zone 3 is high intensity, zone 1 low intensity, which is just walking, and then like zone 2 like power walk on an incline, like stuff like that.
And you said for 90 minutes or an hour?
No, so it's 180 minutes a week is what
Okay,
they did.
gotcha.
So it was what? That's 30 minutes, 6 days a week.
Gotcha. Okay, that doesn't seem too bad. And what are the the benefits of working out again? Could you also go into that and just explain like, because I'm a big believer in just staying active, just keep
Hmm.
just moving your body. You just got to keep going because that does. I don't know the science behind it, but I know it releases endorphins to your brain, and so that you know, because what is that feeling after you work out? Like for me, like I describe working out like as going to therapy. Like I always feel better like after I get
Mhm.
done working out, even if it was just a few exercises. I don't know, it just feels good to work out. What is that specifically happening in
Yeah.
our brain?
So I would say it's two things. It's the endorphins you get and dopamine.
Mm.
Exercise increases dopamine, and dopamine makes you feel good. So I would say it's those two things. On top of like you're feeling accomplished when you walk out of there. Like, you know what I mean? Like when you walk out of the gym, you just accomplish something. And so, I mean, yeah, what makes you feel good when you accomplish something? It's dopamine.
Mm.
So it's really the dopamine that you get, which is another reason why it's so good for people, especially like I don't want to claim that I have ADHD because I don't like claiming like that. But I
Hmm.
was diagnosed with ADHD like when I was in high school, and so for like people that deal with that, it's so helpful because there's said to be, there's not like an official this is what ADHD is, but issues with dopamine signaling, dopamine levels, whether it be with transporters or whatever it is, because they're not sure. But increasing dopamine will help you focus throughout the rest of the day if you do it in the morning. And it also will just increase your energy levels because you're waking up, so you're getting the heart rate going. Even on days where I don't have time to work out in the morning, I'll still get up and like do some sun salutations, downward dogs, stretches, like just a couple, like jump up and down, burpees or whatever, literally just a couple of them, because I noticed the difference between like my breathing in the first, when I first wake up, and if I don't have time to work out, if I just do like 3 downward dogs or whatever, I
Hmm.
feel like I can actually breathe way clearer after the third one. So
Hmm.
like it's like you just spent all night, super slow breathing. Your heart rate's been super slow. Like jump starting your system in the first thing in the morning will help you so much. And that's why exercise does that. It's jump starting everything. It's getting your blood pumping, your heart rate is increasing, your lungs are expanding way fuller. You're actually like breathing into your diaphragm. At least whenever you're breathing super heavy, whenever you start breathing really fast, then it's not as much into your diaphragm. But yeah. So it's just waking you up as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. I like. So is it always best to work out in the morning then?
They say, I mean, yeah, it is best to work out in
Hmm.
the morning only because it can mess with your sleep at night. I know
Gotcha.
for a lot of people it doesn't. And so, I mean, like, do whatever's best for you. Like, I know I've had days where I don't have time and I'll go at 5 p.m. after work.
Hmm.
Like, totally, like, and if you're exercising, either way, it's good for you. So, like, it doesn't really matter that much, obviously. But if you want to get those benefits, like being able to, like, focus better throughout the day and things like that, then it is better to work out in the morning. But you're still going to get like the physical benefits of working out at night, obviously. It just might mess with your sleep.
That's interesting. Well, speaking of sleep, how important is it when it comes to your average on what you average at night, per sleep? How important is like is 8 hours optimal, or can you live that entrepreneur lifestyle by doing 5 to 6 hours a night? Because for me, I love sleep now. Like I feel like if I get my 8 hours, like the next day when I wake up from those 8 hours of sleep, I feel absolutely amazing. I feel like focused. I feel like my mind is, just clear. Do you know anything about, how important sleep is and the amount we get?
So, to put it in perspective, sleep is literally the only thing that we like can't live without that doesn't make sense evolutionarily. So like eating, obviously, like we need energy and fuel and water, right? Makes sense. Sleep makes no sense because we could get killed while we're asleep, right? But we
Mm-hmm.
have to do it. Like we literally have to do it. It's the only thing that our we couldn't get rid of when we were like going through evolution or whatever. Like your body was still like, hey, like we have to sleep. Sleep is so important. It's when your memories are consolidated. It's when your brain cleans itself. So yeah, sleep is very important because you're clearing out just like a lot of toxins and things. Sleep is 100% important. So, but for the amount of sleep, I think it's extremely individualized. It's really interesting that you say that, because that you really feel better after 8 hours, because I've always kind of felt that if I sleep that long or longer, I don't feel as good when I wake up.
Mm.
And I think I also go through phases, but I am really into like naturopathic healing and Ayurvedic way of life, which is like super ancient teachings, and it's kind of like where I follow a lot of like diet as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I actually was just listening. Have you heard of Deepak Chopra?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I was just listening to one of his books, Magical Mind, Magical Body. And he's just great. Like, I really love Deepak Chopra. Anyway, so he was talking about, we have 3 different mind body types: Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. And those 3 mind body types all actually require a different amount of sleep. And for me, I've always felt like I only need like 6 or 7 hours. And like that's like optimum for me. Like if I get like 6.5, 7, like I have so much energy throughout the day. If I
Mm-hmm.
sleep like less than 6, like we're having issues. And if I sleep more than 8, I'm having issues. So, and then I've learned that I'm more of like a pitta mind body type. So I think it really depends on your mind body type. And if you don't know it, there's free quizzes on Deepak Chopra's website, and you can just go take it and then find out what you are. And also another one of my someone that I really love is Sahara Rose.
Yes.
And yeah, and her website also has a free quiz that you can do, and it'll tell you your mind body type. And she also has like Ayurvedic cookbooks and a whole book on like finding your dharma, which is your life's purpose, which is also really interesting. Like you can find out what you're like kind of here to do in this life,
Mm-hmm.
which is, and it's always subject to change as well as we change. So
Yeah.
it's really interesting. Yeah.
Okay. That's yeah. I love. I don't follow Deepak Chopra too much, but I do follow Sahara Rose. I haven't done too much of consuming her content, but I do. I did take her Dharma quiz, and I forgot what it was, but she has really great content too. She's super fun, and her and
Mm-hmm.
Deepak, they kind of their
Yeah.
their paths are like aligned, if you will.
Right. He wrote the foreword to her book,
Mm-hmm.
actually. And he was like a huge inspiration for her. And he's a huge inspiration for me as well, because he's an MD who kind of like went into the medical field and realized like this isn't really working. Like, I don't want to do this. I can kind of see a similar path for myself, if I'm being honest. Like,
Mm-hmm.
Deepak Chopra is a huge inspiration of mine, because I can kind of see me like getting my PhD, and like I know I don't want to go into big pharma. I know I don't want to work with
Yeah.
like what you're doing. Like, I honestly kind of like he's using it as like, yes, I have this perspective in medicine and stuff, and I can like use that when necessary, but all that knowledge that he has now, he can take into like the naturopathic world and be like, hey, look, like this is actually why all of these things work. And it's really cool to explain like how spiritual things and all of that align with science, because it does. That's like what made me super in love with neuroscience, honestly, was just when I started to realize like, oh, neuroscience kind of actually explains a lot of spirituality. Like it makes it all make sense. And I was just like, yeah. So I mean, that's why like I'm sure you know who Joe Dispenza is and all of
Yes.
those. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so I think that they're all doing a great job, and I think that we need more people like that. Like maybe I could work with Joe someday, because he doesn't have like his doctorate in like a science field, so he's like,
Mm-hmm.
I saw that he's partnering with like um, a university. I think he's at UC San Diego partnering, is what I saw on his website, because I was looking for his research because I'm really interested in it, and I saw that he really doesn't have anything published. Because long story short, someone in my program was like looked into him because I told them I really liked him, and they're like, oh, he's like actually a chiropractor, like you can't trust anything he says. I'm like, okay,
Mm.
well, that doesn't mean that you can't trust anything he says, because you can do a ton of research and learn a lot, but it does kind of hinder your ability to do like have a lab and stuff, like, and
Yeah.
run
Yeah.
participants. Yeah. So
Have you heard of? Because I love Joe Dispenza too. I actually have his book called how something about breaking free of from being yourself or something like that. I don't know if you heard of it. It's one of his well-known books. But there's another person's book that I've read. I think they got their PhD as well. But have you heard of David Hawkins?
Yeah, I have.
Power versus Force, letting go.
I haven't read that, but should I
Uh-huh.
read that? Do you recommend it?
I do. It's super for me. I have to read it twice because I'm a college dropout, but
That
I
doesn't mean
have to read
anything.
it twice.
If you're listening, it doesn't mean anything.
I
Okay,
know.
college isn't for everyone.
You're right. You're right. But yeah, I think you should read it because it kind of talks about I'm sure you may have heard it because that's another thing I love about what you do is your ability to bridge spirituality and neuroscience. Kind of just I do agree with what you said as well. Like neuroscience does explain spirituality, and spirituality I think they kind of explain each other. But the book talks about how we have like a scale of emotions that we kind of go up and down on. And it kind of breaks down like how you can be vibrating at a certain frequency. And right, like you want to be either operating in power or force. And force is anything below 200, and then 200 and above is you're operating in power. And one of the emotions, like one of the power emotions, is love. So like when you operate in love, you're operating at this certain frequency. Therefore, you don't. Yeah, see, I have to go back and read it again, but it's basically you want to keep operating on kind of the emotions on the power side, where
Right.
um, your your actions are aligned with that emotion. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that makes sense, but basically your emotions are almost just guiding systems for you to kind of navigate through life. I don't know.
100%. I think that is totally true. There's a song I love. The lyric is "the highest frequency is love." I mean, one of my favorite quotes, and I was literally going to post it. I literally saw it in the comments under a YouTube video, but it said that we are all love looking for a place to happen. And it's because we were
Mm,
all created out of love. Everything that exists in this universe, like we don't, whatever you believe created all of this, like it was all created out of love. Like everything here, like it, at its, when you break apart all the tiny little atoms and it's just literally waves and particles, it's just love. It's all, and if we all just were to operate out of love, then yeah, we would have a very peaceful society. And that's something that I choose to do every single day, is do everything that I do out of love and in service to others. That's something I learned from Oprah. I got really into Oprah for a while as well. She says, if you do everything you do out of love and in service to others, then you can't possibly fail. You won't ever fail. You're not failing because you're serving other people. And that in itself is success. So.
yeah, I agree. I agree. A lot of, spiritual schools of thought, they talk about, even religion, like Christianity, like one of the biggest drivers or I guess characteristic of Christians is love. And I think that's because love is a universal principle that it's more of an energy. You know what I mean? Love is an energy. Like the more you operate in that energy, the more I guess you're drawing in what love attracts. You're drawing in more love. When you put out more love, you're going to draw in more love. And so, yeah, I think that's awesome that you were able to recognize that about love. There was another thing that I was going to ask. Oh yes, there was a TikTok you had as well. You were talking about consciousness. What what is consciousness from your perspective? Like what are we like? How are we doing what we do? The ability to think, the ability to speak, the ability to kind of use our bodies in ways that allows us to create. Where do you think? I know it's kind of a big question, but where do you think consciousness comes from? Like, what is that?
So where do I think it comes from? The universe. I think that everything is energy. That's what I believe, is that everything that exists is energy. We are energy. We are not human beings. We are being human right now.
Mm.
So we are just, consciousness to me is that energy that can't be touched and it can't be seen. It's what's powering our brain and our bodies to move, but it's not necessarily our brain or our body. And so it's kind of like, there's definitely neuroscience research. And so my video was about a neuroscientist theory that I had watched on YouTube, which was very interesting. They did a study where, and they had all these mathematical calculations, and they said that consciousness correlated with the level of complexity of the neural activity cell firing, of the patterns of firing of our neurons in our brain. And they said that the more complex the firing patterns were, correlated with, you would be more conscious, let's say. Mm-hmm. So they gave people psychedelic drugs. I know they used LSD. I can't remember the other two, but there were 3 of them. And they showed how it increased the complexity of the firing. And that correlates with like the idea that, you know, those drugs increase consciousness, right? And for me, I agree with that, because I kind of agree with that theory, just because, so this is kind of like something I've always thought about, and it coincides with my research in undergrad, because in undergrad I researched learning and memory in kids throughout development. And we saw that while kids develop, like from childhood to adulthood, we develop the ability to segregate our memories, the events in time. We start separating them, but kids don't really separate events in time by context. They don't really separate. They just kind of do whatever they are doing. But as we become adults, we're way more likely to look at events that happened at different contexts and say, those happened at way different times. And for me, I'm like, okay, so kids aren't separating so much. They're keeping all of their ideas kind of together. And kids also have way more neural connections. So we're born with way more synaptic connections in our brain, like way more neurons are connected. And then as we learn and develop, we actually prune off. So like pruning is kind of like shriveling away, right? So like less neurons are connected. We're making divisions in our ideas and literally in our brain. So as we're learning to judge and differentiate things, our brain does the same. It differentiates things and it segregates things. And so kids have the ability within this theory, right, to have more complex firing because there's more connections. And so that would mean that kids are more conscious. And for me, I was kind of like, this makes sense because, you know, they always say like kids see ghosts, kids can talk to spirit. They're way more spiritually aware than adults are. And, you know, as adults, we become conditioned by society to be whatever they want us to be. And we lose that ability kind of, but also our brain develops in a way that doesn't help because we kind of lose the ability to have that complex firing. But I think that what they showed was that psychedelics kind of might give us a little bit of that. Through what mechanism, I'm not sure. I know that some of them kind of just flush our brain with a lot of serotonin or a lot of dopamine or whatever way the drug specific, depend on the drug, but whichever way that drug is working, it's just flushing the system with tons of neurotransmitters, which would activate not all, but a lot of more cells than normal, which could allow for more complex firing and increased consciousness. So that was kind of a very complicated and long-winded answer. But I think that's because consciousness is really complicated and long-winded, and and that also is all obviously not stated as fact either. And in a year from now, I might tell you a completely different answer because I learned something that changed my mind. So, but yeah, currently that's where I'm at with that.
Okay. Yeah, it's so basically, psychedelics allows us to, there's something about psychedelics that allow us to kind of open up these neural pathways that were once closed, if I heard that correctly, right?
Or not necessarily closed, but kind of just like shriveled away. But yeah,
Gotcha.
for like simplified purposes, yeah. I mean, yeah, it's not exactly that, but yeah, yeah. For like, I
Gotcha.
mean, because it's like if you just imagine basically like a spider web where everything's connected as like a little
Mm-hmm.
kid's brain, and then or just like a road, no, because a spider web where everything's connected, and then all of a sudden like half of the web stop being connected, and like there's just a giant hole there now, and there's no connections anymore. That's kind of
Gotcha.
our brain. Yeah, we just lose connections as we develop,
So
but
it's
we
all
also
still there.
learn. What'd you say?
So it's all still there.
Well, so it's not like, what do you mean by it's all still there?
Like those neural pathways that we had when we were kids that allowed us to see, just I guess be more conscious, if you will.
I think they have the potential to reconnect.
Gotcha.
I would say. I think so. Like whenever like, a big part of spirituality is healing your inner child and
Mm-hmm.
becoming childlike, not childish, but childlike, and having that like joyful, youthful energy, and that does kind of awaken you to more spirituality, and like as you become more connected or whatever, you do start to feel more youthful, and I think that that could there could be like branches, like connections to be made there. Yeah. I think that you can kind of bring it back for sure.
Gotcha. Because the only psychedelic I've ever done was mushrooms, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they were psilocybin because I know there's just different kinds of them, but what it did for me, like I didn't see like another spiritual world, but it almost felt like it's gonna sound very woo woo, but it just felt like everything was almost like a video game. Like I just saw the vibrancy of like the trees, the body of water that was around. It was a very interesting experience, but it felt good. Like I felt like super joyful and like
You feel kind of like a little kid when you do mushrooms, don't you?
yes, yes.
Yeah,
Have you done it?
yeah, I've done them plenty
Okay.
of times. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you feel like a little kid, like playing finger painting. I like my trip sitter had like a piñata one time for us, and I remember. Well, I think the time that really like caused me to realize that I wasn't that all of it was real, right? Because a lot of times they say like, how do you know that the drugs aren't just making you see something that's not there? But
Mm-hmm.
I had an experience where I was standing and I looked at my hand and I saw the blood, like I saw my hand turn pink and then it was going white. And then it was turning pink and then it was going white. I was like, what is happening? My hand is changing colors. And then my friend that was with me, she was like, no, like that's the blood flowing, circulating in and out of your hand. And
Whoa.
I was like, oh my God, like, yeah, that is what that is. Like, literally, I'm watching. And that's when I knew. I was like, oh no, like, this actually allows you to see more. Like, this isn't made up because that is actually what's happening. Like, the
Hmm.
blood is flowing through my hand. Like, I could see it.
That's wild. That's pretty cool. I haven't gotten there yet, but I'd like to get to the point where
Well, maybe you
machine
just
elves are
didn't
talking to
notice.
me. Maybe I just didn't know it.
Maybe you just didn't notice. Like, you just didn't look at your hand and, like,
That's
really
true.
notice. Because this wasn't my first time, like, doing it that I witnessed this. This was, like, a few times in. So,
Oh, so
yeah.
it keeps happening. Is that
But
what I'm saying?
I think that like I just hadn't noticed my hand before. I just never looked
Gotcha.
at it like that, and I was just standing there and I was staring at my hand, and I was like, oh god, because every time it's different. So
Right, right. Yeah, definitely. I've probably only done it maybe like 3 times, and I want to do it not for like the recreational aspect, but more so like the just kind of exploring the depths of the mind
yeah,
aspect. And
hmm
so I'm very curious. Like, I eventually want to try and go and do an ayahuasca ceremony because I'm curious. Like,
same.
what's gonna happen when I take this thing that you just combine in nature and all of a sudden you're in a whole nother dimension. That's wild to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's the reason why I like mushrooms is because they are from nature. Like that's something that I've kind of always said. Like I'm a little hesitant to take drugs that are made by humans just because like were they meant for us to take? I don't
Hmm.
know. But like that's why for mushrooms I was really and like same with the ayahuasca. I was actually just watching I don't ever scroll on TikTok, but like last night for some reason, I mean there's this one person on TikTok that's like talks a lot about conspiracies and spiritual
Hmm.
things, like really deep into the depths. It's called I think her username is like Alexa Serves Tea. If
Alexa
you haven't
serves tea. Let me
if
write
you
that down.
look into this person. Oh my gosh, it's gonna blow your mind. I literally there's her one of her pinned TikToks literally makes me cry every time I watch it, and
Really?
I know it's I really feel it. Like I get goosebumps, and I like I'm very spiritually connected, and so like I know things. Like when I know things, I know things. I watched this TikTok, and literally my eyes start like I literally was crying, and it was like not of sadness, but it was out of like pure like shock. You know, I'm like, oh my god, this is
What
so
was it?
crazy. Oh, it was about just oh man, like I'm gonna butcher it,
It's
but
okay.
basically it's about how our calendar system, I can't remember the name of our calendar system.
Hmm.
I'm not sure if it's Gregorian, but the Mayan were, but Ethiopia is actually like in 2014 right now.
Oh, I
Because
heard about that. I don't know if it was
they
her, but I heard
follow,
something like that.
yeah, because they follow a 13-month year and not a 12-month.
Yes.
And apparently that's actually what the Mayans did. Like the most ancient calendars used a 13-month year. And so, and you know, the Mayans predict the end of the world in 2012, but when I'm getting goosebumps right now even saying it, but like when COVID happened, it was 2020 here when like America shut down and everything, but it was
Uh-huh.
2012 according to the
Whoa.
Mayan
I just
calendar.
got chills.
Yeah. Yeah. So go check her out on TikTok. It's
That's wild. So are they like, so we're living in the future then, technically.
yeah, I mean all time exists at once, right?
That's true. That's real. That's real. But
Mhm.
that's wild. So they're literally in, you said 2014?
Yeah. And there's people in the comments of this TikTok from other countries. They're like, yeah, we're in 2014 right now. Like, I didn't even know that. Like, there are places on this planet that aren't fall like they're in a completely different
Time zone.
year.
Or like not even
Right.
time zone, like they're in a, just a
And not that it
different,
matters, right? Because it's
right,
just a label we're putting on what year it is.
right. Yeah, that's so interesting. So that leads me to ask, like, what do you think about the multiverse? Is it real?